This man did Britain a great deal of harm. Yes, this man of whom many Americans seem to think that he was such a lovely, well-mannered British Prime Minister, standing shoulder to shoulder with their rebel republic after 9/11. But then the Americans did not have to live with him. We, the British, did. He introduced plenty of nasty legislation, even some ridiculous legislation. Tony Blair came to power in 1997. By 1998, he had his first hate crime legislation. Just to be clear, the Labour government introduced a great deal of nonsense, including a law by which it is not permitted to set off nuclear explosions. Yes, thanks to them it is now banned. No matter that there was already law banning folks from setting off explosions in Britain that dates back to the 19th century. No matter that we have laws against murder or terrorism. And even in the unlikely event of you setting off a nuclear bomb and nobody getting hurt, there is always criminal damage. But no, Tony had willed it. So you are now no longer permitted to set off thermonuclear devices in Britain. I am glad that is cleared up, aren't you? But such utter nonsense aside, Blair with his hate crime laws stabbed at the very heart of Britain. I know that may sound a touch melodramatic, especially for me. Nonetheless, there you have it. Britain is an inherently humorous and irreverent country. We poke fun. We disrespect authority. We mock friend and foe alike. It is in our very DNA. Have you ever heard of James Gillray? He was an 18th century caricaturist. He took on anyone. The Prime Minister, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and yes, the royal family. Anyone. In the 1700s. In many another country, that might have got you hanged. Gillray's caricatures were not secretly published pamphlets. This man was published, properly, in Punch magazine. We allowed it. His was the sharpest pen in the country. 18th century Britain did not silence him for supposed hatred. The tradition continues. The caricaturist Gerald Scarfe is still viciously satirical, published in the Times and Sunday Times. Political caricature is a long-standing British tradition. Not even Blair would dare go near that. But our liking of caricature and satire stems from our innate sense of comedy, the surreal and the ridiculous. To the British, nothing, absolutely nothing, is off limits. If it is funny, you can get away with blue murder. And British comedians were indeed very funny. Britain gained a global reputation. But you look at British comedy today, and you weep. It has been laid waste. The BBC, with its political correctness and its compliance officers, has done its worst. But so too has the government with its hate crime legislation. Not least as the government fostered much of the political correctness, now so rife in the BBC. But you struggle to think of anything worthwhile produced in comedy in the last decade or two in this country. And this from the nation which gave the world the Goons, Tony Hancock, Monty Python, and on and on. Why does this matter? The law of England and Wales, that of Northern Ireland and that of Scotland are separate entities. So things have been added here and there, making it hard for someone not versed in law to follow which has been added where and when. Safe to say, Scotland has its own hate crime legislation, and, like the others, it has been expanded over time. This brings us to Count Dankula. He is being prosecuted for making a joke. I stress, this is not the first such case. What did Count Dankula do? He made what some feel was a wrong joke. He was arrested, and now charges of hate crime hang over him like a sword of Damocles. The prosecution is underway. The trial is about 2 months away. Please do not think this will lead nowhere, simply because his case is silly. This has gone awry in the past, so please do not simply think that common sense will prevail at first. Since Blair in particular, common sense, the law, and jurisprudence have very little in common anymore in Britain. So what did Count Dankula do? What was his supposed crime? he taught his girlfriend's dog to do a Nazi salute. Well, to be frank, he taught it to lift its paw, to the command of saying Sieg Heil. He also had the dog react to him saying Gas the Jews. That said, that hardly looks like training to me. It simply looks to me as though the dog turns to look at him and the camera when he hears him say something. He filmed it and put it up on the net. And the result? Someone felt offended to the core of their very soul, and the police was called. Now, is it funny? To some, yes. To others, no. Does it matter? Not in the slightest. It was obviously a joke. I mean, what do people think could possibly be the motivation of a man who trains a dog to raise its paw in a Nazi salute to the words Sieg Heil? What possible malicious intent could there be? Are we really saying that seeing a dog, a pug no less, do a Nazi salute could count as Nazi propaganda? Is anyone, I mean anyone, going to be swayed toward Nazi ideology because they saw Count Dankula's girlfriend's dog turn its head toward the camera at the phrase, Gas the Jews? Talking of propaganda, you may feel free to place the entire collection of speeches of Herr Hitler on YouTube. No problem. British law will not intervene. But a dog doing a Nazi salute, and the police are on their way. Also consider that Mel Brooks' movie The Producers, complete with the show-stopping musical routine Springtime for Hitler, is still on sale in Britain today. For those who may be thinking that I am indulging in hyperbole here, let us hear from Count Dankula himself.
The charge that I'm being charged under is hate crime relating to the Nazi pug video. My trial will involve no jury, it's only a judge, which means it is the judge's decision and solely the judge's decision as to whether I am guilty or not guilty. There are witnesses appearing at the trial. I understand that information is circulating in regards to these witnesses themselves. What I would ask everyone to do is do not fucking contact them or harass them. Don't do anything like that. Don't be fucking dicks. You're just going to make the situation worse.
Now, aside from the astonishing amount of ironmongery in the man's face, his frustration is palpable. With this hanging over his head, his entire life is on hold. He is seeking a new job, but cannot get anywhere, as he has a court case pending for telling a joke.
I just want this to be fucking over. Like, it was a fucking joke, man. It was a joke. Fuck me, man. It was a fucking joke. So we now need to wait another 2 months before we're going to get any kind of resolution to this. All I can do in the meantime is just keep shitposting. Fuck it.
Look into his weary eyes and you can tell what it means to live with this nonsense. This is the reality of hate crime law. There is of course a shiny website proclaiming the virtues of hate crime legislation in Scotland. The site is www.hatecrimesscotland.org. Their frequently asked questions section is enlightening, to say the least. What is hate crime? Answer: hate crimes are crimes that are motivated by prejudice of some kind. These are crimes where the victim is targeted because they are a member of a particular social group, or have a particular characteristic, which the perpetrator has negative views or beliefs about. In Scotland, the law recognises crimes motivated by prejudice based on race, including nationality, ethnicity and skin colour, religion, sexual orientation, disability, including physical disability, learning disability, and mental health difficulty, transgender identity. Why do we need hate crime laws? Answer: the Scottish Government Working Group on Hate Crime gives 3 reasons for having hate crime legislation. First of all, if you create a hate crime working group, do you think they will ever find no reason to have hate crime law? It's just a thought. 1. research consistently shows that some social groups are proportionately more often victims of harassment and crime, and that much of this is motivated by prejudice against those groups. 2. Hate crimes can cause more psychological damage to a victim than crimes that are not motivated by hatred, because the victim's core identity is being attacked. This personalizes the crime and can cause the victim a greater amount of distress. 3. Hate crime is socially divisive. Such crimes need to be particularly condemned in order to avoid a situation in which the relevant groups feel victimized as a group, with members in constant fear of attack. Prejudice against groups can lead to a number of consequences, ranging from fear of crime and inability to participate in normal social activities to paranoia and vigilantism. Oh well, I'm convinced. How do I prove that something is a hate crime? Answer: it is not your responsibility to prove that a hate crime has occurred. It is the job of the police to gather evidence from a range of sources during their investigation of an incident. This includes CCTV footage, witness statements, and forensic evidence. The Lord Advocate has told the police that an incident must be investigated as a hate crime if it is perceived by the victim or any other person to be aggravated by prejudice. This means that your perceptions are important. When you report a hate crime, tell the police that you believe it was motivated by prejudice, and why you think that is the case. This could be about the language used at the time, things you have heard the suspects say in the past, or that certain groups are being singled out in your street, building, etc. Finally, what does the Procurator Fiscal say about hate crime? Please, just think of it being the Scottish term for prosecutor, or Office of the Prosecution. Answer: the Procurator Fiscal's stance on hate crime is the same as the government or other agencies. The Fiscal states, "Our zero-tolerance prosecution policy for hate crimes motivated by prejudice sends a clear message that there is no room for bigotry and intolerance. Hate crime is investigated and prosecuted rigorously." So should there still be any doubt that they will come after you like bloodhounds, should you say the wrong thing, I think the Procurator Fiscal has cleared that up quite nicely. Maybe it is worth mentioning here that Scotland has a major drug problem. In particular, heroin is a major issue. It is of course categorized as a Class A drug, and thus dealing in it is very much against the law. Yet the authorities are wasting police time chasing this sort of hate crime nonsense and granting it significant priority. In previous times, the police would have been able to shrug it off, to tell the complaining misanthrope that they had better things to do than arrest people for teaching their dogs tricks. But thanks to Mr. Blair, and those who followed in his wake, this is now high priority crime. But let us be clear, responsibility rests not with Mr. Blair alone. Now sure, he was the creature whose government introduced that legislation into Britain in the first place. But has any Prime Minister since had the guts to revoke it? No, of course not. So it sits there and festers. Worse, it gradually expands. It emboldens the social justice clique as they see their ideas enforced in law, as they see people punished for wrongthink. But what does it do to the Count Dankulas of this world? It makes them careful about what they say. It makes them careful about what jokes they tell. Suddenly something that ought to be a basic freedom is something you need to consider closely. You need to weigh whether saying what you think might get you into trouble. Your opinions and off-the-cuff remarks suddenly need to stand up in court. In Britain, in 2017, 33 years after 1984, you need to be careful about what jokes you tell. James Gillray must be turning in his grave. That is all from the Cyberpass for now. Thank you very much, and goodbye.